keep me from being in the film because they felt that and they were right, that I was not of an equal stature to Paul Newman. And they were right about that.
Paul Newman wasn't just a movie star. He was the man who made cool look effortless. With those piercing blue eyes, that half smile, and a presence that could light up the screen, he became the definition of Hollywood perfection. A devoted husband, a philanthropist who gave away hundreds of millions of dollars, a man who seemed untouchable. But here's the thing about perfection. People can't resist trying to tear it apart. Behind the charm, behind the awards and the headlines, the whispers never stopped. Stories of secret lives, rumors too wild to ignore, and questions that Newman himself never fully answered. For years, fans were left guessing. And then, his closest friend, Robert Redford, finally spoke out. What he revealed didn't just shock Hollywood, it made even Newman's biggest admirers see him in a way they never have before. If you've ever found yourself moved by his movies, quoting his lines, or even buying a bottle of his famous salad dressing, hit the like button now. And make sure you're subscribed, because the story you're about to hear will make you look at Paul Newman in a way you never have before. From the very start, Paul Newman looked like the kind of man Hollywood dreamed up in a lab. Those legendary blue eyes weren't just striking, they became a symbol splashed across magazine covers, film posters, and even whispered about in interviews. Directors called him the man the camera loved. Audiences saw him as rugged yet tender, a rebel with just enough vulnerability to break your heart. But Newman's image wasn't just about good looks. He radiated control. No scandals splashing across tabloids, no embarrassing drunken outbursts at parties. In an industry built on chaos and drama, Paul Newman appeared unshakable. Too unshakable. And that's where the seeds of suspicion began to grow. When someone seems that perfect, people start wondering, what's he hiding? Was there more to Newman than the flawless golden boy Hollywood sold to the world? Before the fame, before the glossy magazine covers, Paul Newman wasn't Hollywood's untouchable golden boy. He was just a kid from Shaker Heights, Ohio, with a restless energy and something to prove. What most fans don't realize is that Newman's early life was filled with rejection and setbacks. He dreamed of being a pilot in World War II, only to be turned away for something he couldn't control, his colorblindness. For a man who seemed to have been born with everything, that rejection hit hard. But Newman didn't walk away. Instead, he joined the Navy as a radio man and gunner, serving with quiet grit. That discipline, the kind learned in cramped cockpits and unpredictable seas, shaped the man he would become. It gave him a kind of edge, a seriousness beneath the charm that audiences would one day sense in his performances. And then came another twist, because Newman didn't just stumble into acting. Unlike so many pretty faces of his generation, he trained seriously at Yale Drama School, a move that shocked people who assumed his looks would carry him. He wanted to be taken seriously, to be respected, not just as the man with the blue eyes, but as someone who could dig deeper. But here's where the story starts to bend, because even as Newman built himself into the disciplined, respected actor he longed to be, whispers already lingered. Why was he so private? Why did he avoid the wild Hollywood parties everyone else seemed to thrive on? To some, his restraint looked like class. To others, it looked like a cover. By the late 1950s, Paul Newman wasn't just another rising star. He was Hollywood royalty in the making. Every magazine hailed him as the complete package. The looks, the talent, the discipline. But there was one detail that pushed him over the edge into legend status: Joanne Woodward. Their marriage became the envy of Hollywood. In a town where affairs, divorces, and scandals seemed to hit the papers every week, Paul and Joanne stood as proof that true love could survive under the blinding glare of fame. She wasn't just his wife, she was his equal. An Oscar-winning actress in her own right, Joanne had a talent that demanded respect. Together, they became the industry's golden couple. Fans adored them. Headlines called them unshakable. And for decades, Newman leaned into this image of loyalty, discipline, and almost superhuman decency. He built charities, he raised children, he stayed out of trouble. On the surface, he was the dream every Hollywood studio wanted to sell. But here's where things get complicated. In Hollywood, perfect rarely lasts. And the more Newman leaned into that golden image, the louder the whispers became. Some people admired his devotion. Others started to wonder, was his marriage too perfect, too polished? Rumors trickled through back channels that his love life wasn't what it seemed, that Joanne was more patient than the world realized, that Newman himself kept parts of his true self locked away from everyone but a select few. On screen, he was captivating. Off screen, he was untouchable. But in the shadows, people were asking a dangerous question. Was Paul Newman hiding something? For all of Newman's polished image, there was one thing he could never quite outrun: the whispers. Hollywood thrives on gossip, and Newman, as clean, loyal, and disciplined as he appeared, became the subject of one of the industry's most persistent rumor mills. It centered on his closest friend, writer A.E. Hotchner. The two were inseparable. Hotchner wasn't just a colleague or casual friend, he was Newman's confidant, his partner in business, his shadow at public events. Wherever Paul went, Hotchner wasn't far behind. To some, this bond was heartwarming. To others, it was suspicious. The rumor? That Newman's marriage to Joanne was more of a shield than a fairy tale, a cover for a hidden side of himself. Hollywood insiders whispered that his deep connection with Hotchner went beyond friendship. Tabloids never printed it outright, but the stories were passed along in quiet conversations, in industry circles, in knowing glances when Newman's name came up. And Newman didn't help the gossip die down. He wasn't a fixture at Hollywood parties. He avoided the spotlight outside of his work. He didn't play the part of the swaggering, womanizing star. Instead, he carved his own quiet lane, and that quiet made people suspicious. For years, Newman stayed silent. He never directly addressed the rumors, never lashed out, never explained, which only fueled the intrigue. Because in Hollywood, when you don't deny something, people start to believe it might just be true. If the rumors bothered Paul Newman, you'd never know it by looking at his career. Because while Hollywood insiders whispered in corners, audiences were buying tickets in droves. The 1960s turned Newman from rising star into cultural icon. In The Hustler, 1961, he delivered a performance so raw and magnetic that critics hailed him as one of the greatest actors of his generation. 2 years later, in HUD, he shocked audiences by playing a cold, selfish anti-hero and made people love him even more for it. Then came Cool Hand Luke in 1967, where Newman immortalized one of cinema's most quoted lines: "What we've got here is failure to communicate." That single line alone secured him a permanent place in film history. And then, the film that sealed his legacy. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Starring opposite Robert Redford, Newman wasn't just acting, he was rewriting what a leading man could be. Funny, rebellious, flawed, and irresistibly likable. Their chemistry was so undeniable that people started calling it the most iconic duo in Hollywood history. But here's the twist. The more Newman rose, the more the whispers followed him. How could someone this famous, this adored, remain untouched by scandal? Fans clung to his image as the loyal husband, the generous philanthropist, the Hollywood outsider who seemed too good to be true. Yet backstage, the same question lingered. Was Newman's perfect reputation just another performance? The higher he climbed, the more people wanted to know what secrets he was keeping. Just when Hollywood thought they had Paul Newman figured out, he surprised everyone. Because acting wasn't his only obsession. Away from the cameras, Newman found a new love, one that was loud, fast, and dangerous: racing. What started as a hobby while filming turned into something far more serious. Newman trained, competed, and eventually became a respected professional race car driver. He wasn't just a movie star playing dress-up in a helmet. He was good. So good that he placed at Le Mans and continued racing well into his 70s. Fans were stunned. Critics called him reckless. But for Newman, it was about freedom. On the track, he wasn't a Hollywood star. He was just another driver chasing speed and precision. And then came another shock. Newman, the man who always seemed so private, so closed off, launched a salad dressing. Yes, a salad dressing. What began as a joke with his friend A.E. Hotchner turned into Newman's own, a brand that exploded into supermarkets everywhere. But here's the kicker. Newman gave away every dime of profit. Not millions, not tens of millions, hundreds of millions. To date, his company has donated more than $600 million to charity. To the public, it seemed like proof that Newman really was the man he appeared to be. Generous, selfless, almost saint-like. But even here, the whispers followed. Some critics accused him of using philanthropy as a shield, a way to polish his image and deflect from rumors about his private life. Others suggested the staggering donations were just too perfect, too convenient. It didn't matter if there was truth behind the accusations or not. In Hollywood, when a man seems that good, people will always look for the flaw. And soon, those doubts would turn darker than ever. For decades, Paul Newman managed to outrun the rumors. But even the cleanest reputations eventually attract darker shadows. And for Newman, those shadows struck at the very heart of the thing he held most dear, his generosity. Newman's Own had become a phenomenon. Millions of bottles sold, millions of dollars given away. To most people, it was inspiring. But not everyone bought the story. Behind closed doors, critics began suggesting that his empire wasn't as pure as it looked. Whispers circled that Newman's philanthropy was little more than a tax shelter, that the donations were part of a carefully crafted PR strategy to protect his image. Some even dared to claim that Newman's generosity wasn't about kindness at all, but about guilt. For fans who adored him, the accusations felt unthinkable. But in Hollywood, once a rumor takes hold, it spreads like wildfire. Newman never lashed out, never staged a dramatic defense. He stayed silent, the same way he had with whispers about his private life. And to some, that silence spoke louder than words. Even Joanne Woodward, the woman who knew him best, seemed quietly frustrated. In rare interviews, she hinted at her disgust with the way people twisted her husband's actions. She defended his character, his loyalty, his goodness. But Joanne's defense only added fuel for the doubters. After all, what else could she say? She was his wife. And then came the moment fans never expected. The moment Paul Newman's closest friend, the man who had worked beside him, laughed with him, and shared his deepest secrets, finally broke his silence. Robert Redford spoke, and what he revealed shocked everyone. Paul Newman's story is one of striking contrasts. He was a Hollywood icon who disliked Hollywood's spotlight, a leading man who seemed larger than life, yet preferred a quiet existence away from the chaos. A philanthropist who gave away hundreds of millions only to face criticism for the very generosity that defined him. And through all of it, he never shouted back, never tried to silence the rumors. He simply kept moving forward, building a legacy stronger than any scandal. Because in the end, legacies aren't built on whispers. They're built on actions. Newman's films continue to move audiences. His marriage to Joanne Woodward lasted half a century, a rare love story in a town known for broken ones. And his charity work still changes lives to this day, proving that the good he left behind will always outweigh the noise. Robert Redford said it best. Paul Newman was loyal, generous, and deeply human. Not flawless, not untouchable. Human. And maybe that's exactly why his story endures. Because what truly lasts isn't perfection. It's impact. But here's the question worth asking. Why do people hold on to rumors about the stars they admire even when the truth is staring them in the face?